Arik Ari Peretz, Ruth Hodaya Peretz, Thanakrit Pratkawang, Ashish Chowdhury, Israel Chana.
Eitan Sneer, Dor Hanan Shafir, Yirmiyahu Shafir, Ziv Pepe Shapira, Tomer Spirer, Ron Shefer, Dudi Sharon, Liam Shrem, Yahel Sharabi, Lian Sharabi, Noya Sharabi, Padam Thapa, Bar Tomer, Avidan Turgaman, Dudi Turgaman, Shoham Leah Turgaman, Fitak Tholeng, Niv Tel Tsur, Adir Tamam, Firum Thanon Fim, Or Tasa, Ran Guel, Yayar Davidov, Yitzhak Shvil, Martin Kozmicheki, Vadim Blich, Avi Amar, Stanislav Shankma, Shlomo Moshe El, Nisim Lugas, Amin Ohonado, Avraham Henkin, Avi Tzido, Dan Ganot, Alexei Shamkalov, Andrei Poshivi, Kim Dokraker, Meir Abargil, Chen Nachmia, Roman Gendel, Yehuda Keda, Roni Oboharon, Adir Shlomo, Yigal Ilu, Dennis Belki, David Ben Dayan, Yaron Morris Daya, Bar Sivan, Alon Bar, Alexei Borodovsky, Vitaly Karasi, Alek Pozniakov, Malik Karim, Devora Debbie Abraham, Uri Eliyahu Cohen, Yakir Blochman, Boris Danilov, Shai Germai.
Noam Rabia, Shai Regev, Michal Roimi, Yvonne Eden Patricia Rubio Vargas, Jana Roderman, Yael Rosman, Matan Rosenberg, Yehonatan Rome, Olga Naomi Romashkin, Ofer Ron, Tzvi Shlomo Ron, Nira Ronen, Yechezkel Razilov, Nitzan Rachum, Aviel Shalom Rachamim, Rabbi Binyamin Rachamim, Dvir Rachamim, Anula Jayatilaka, Gidon Harel Rivlin, Moshe Ridler, Dor Ryder, Eliyahu Reichenstein, Yonatan Richter, Michai Ritipon, Omri Ram, Eli Rafai, Sharon Rafai, Dr. Chagit Rafaeli Mishkin, Yonatan Rappaport, Chai Rechsanun, Robert Shaulov, Elia Shametz, Tomer Segev, Sivan Sharhabani, Moshe Shova, David Alberto Schwartzman, Orly Schwartzman Pinko, Ziv Chopin, Segev Shushan, Mira Stahl, Roni Shitrit, Naomi Shitrit Azulai, Noam Shai, Danielle Shankerman, Mark Schindel, Bar Schechter, David Shalev, Tal Shalev, Shai Shalev, Noam Shalom, Ram Shalom, Asaf Schlesinger, Sharona Shmunis Harel, Inbar Shem Tov, Ben Shimoni, Yaakov Shmaya, Ron Shemer, Tatiana Schnittman.
Neria Ben David, Sagi Golan, Ofek Rousseau, Ariel Ohan, Tomer Dolev, Alexander Masli, Eli Ginsberg, Joseph Itamar Bruchim, Shiloh Kohei, Oren Golden Katz, Ravid Aryeh Katz, Shai Levinson, Asaf Hamami, Shaked Dahan, Kirill Brodsky, Tomer Yaakov Ahimas, Ronnie Eshel, Yam Glass, Shirel Chaim Por, Ziv Dado, Ron Poslushny, Itai Yoshua, Aryeh Kraunek, Oren Stern, Chagai Avni, Ophir Libstein, Tal Elo, Yuval Gabai, Eitan Haddad, Ophir Erez, Shalev Dagan, Ophir Mordechai Yaron, Nadav Amikam, Boaz Abraham, Amit Vax, Daniel Rashed, Ram Negbi, Yaron Victor Shachar, Ophir Shoshani, Avraham Gavriel Koren, Ori Shimon Russo, Shachar Aviani, Ofek Arazi, Elisaf Ben Porat, Sar Margolis, Gil Avital, Aviv Baram, Avraham Fleischer, Itamar Ben Yehuda, Ibrahim Charuba, Adi Baharav Rabinovitz, Dan Asulin, Adi Landman, Omri Perez, Shachar Semach, Iftach Gorni, Osher Simcha Barzilai, Rotem Kutz.
First Sergeant Sharon Nachman, First Sergeant Dror Alton, First Sergeant Yaakov Shlomo Karniansky, First Sergeant Elior Yifara, First Sergeant Uriel Avraham, Master Sergeant Eliyahu Michael Harush, Master Sergeant Eliran Abajil, Master Sergeant Avshalom Yair Peret, Master Sergeant Mor Shkuri, Master Sergeant Aaron Arthur Markovici, Master Sergeant Sharon Leibovich, Master Sergeant Abi Buzagel, Master Sergeant Michael Lizmi, Master Sergeant Shai El Knafo, Sergeant First Class Orel Shalom Alon, Sergeant First Class Aliona Ostapenko, Sergeant First Class Gadif Mologota, Sergeant First Class Dor Mengadi, Sergeant Ravit Khana Asiag, Command Sergeant Major Yanin Sivan, Sergeant Major Yulia Waxer, Command Sergeant Major Shmuel Samzatu Golim, Master Sergeant Maxim Razinkov, Yossi Tahar, Maor Shalom, Eli Nachman, Omer Gavra, Ido Edri, Amit Wa, Sergeant Major Gil Tassa, Deputy Chief Shalom Tsaba, First Sergeant Major Arik Yehuda Marziano, Sergeant Yevgeny Gaakazi, Sergeant Major Roi Moshe, Aharon Chaimov, Shir Biton, Avia Chezroni, Amir Tsur, Amit Man, Yarin Peled, Lior Levi, Eitan Ne'eman, Sa'ar Margolis, Captain Dor Said, Sergeant Yotam Hillel, Sergeant First Class Matanya Ulster, Sergeant Ophir Yeruchin, Captain Roi Nahari, Sergeant First Class Aviel Melkamu, Sergeant First Class Jawad Amer, Master Sergeant Gilad Molcho, Major Eitan Menachem Ne'eman, Captain Yuval Halibni, Master Sergeant Avichai Amsaleh, Lieutenant Colonel Alim Abdallah, Colonel Leon Ba, Major Benjamin Trekenisk, Captain Elchanan Meir Kalmanson.
Sergeant Shimon Lugassi, Sergeant Karen Schwartzman, Sergeant Major Liran Moniz Almosnino, Shirat Yam Amar, Staff Sergeant Naor Siboni, Sergeant Aviv Hagaj, Sergeant Eli Noam Ben Muha, Captain Shir Eilat, Captain Idan Baloy, Captain Shiloh Rashberger, Lieutenant Yochai Duchan, Sergeant Shirel Moore, Staff Sergeant Danielle Sperber, Staff Sergeant Dor Yarchi, Captain Maya Villobo Polo, Sergeant Major Ruven Cheportowski, Staff Sergeant Aviad Revlin, Staff Sergeant Adam Agmon, Sergeant First Class Itai Yehuda Bausi, Yonatan El-Azari, Staff Sergeant Shimon Alroy Ben Shtirit, Staff Sergeant Dolev Amuyal, Sergeant Ido Bienenstock, Major Eli Zisser, Staff Sergeant Devere Zakai, Sergeant Itamar Cohen, Staff Sergeant Tomer Yaakov Mizrahi, Staff Sergeant Sachar Meidani, Noam Avramovich, Sergeant Emil Sayamolov, Master Sergeant Bechor Svid, Master Sergeant Moshe Yedidia Reiziel, Major Ben Bronstein, Sergeant Shai Ashram, Staff Sergeant Avraham Neria Cohen, Sergeant Bar Yankilov, Captain Ori Mordechai Shani, Staff Sergeant Michael Ben Hamo, Captain Ron Zarfati, Staff Sergeant Noam Elimelech Roshtenberg, Sergeant Tomer Nagar, Staff Sergeant Brando David Flores Garcia, Master Sergeant Israel Amichai Vitzen, Sergeant Levi Buchnik, Sergeant Netane Hai Liard, Sergeant Major Salman Eben Marai, Sergeant First Class Elad Michael Sasso, Major Oriel Bibi, Staff Sergeant Shalev Baranas, Staff Sergeant Bar Roshenstein, Staff Sergeant Neharai Said, Sergeant David Middleman, Captain Sachar Sadian, Staff Sergeant Ophir Melman, Staff Sergeant Regev Amar, Sergeant First Class Yonatan Savitsky, Captain Ayal Klein, Staff Sergeant Roy Baraket.
Sergeant Major Shahaf Bergston, Warrant Officer Gil Boam, Major Noy Shosh, Sergeant Tomer Leibovitz, Staff Sergeant Yam Almog Goldstein, Captain Guy Admoni, Staff Sergeant Roy Haim Gori, Master Sergeant Haim Yeshurun Katzman, Staff Sergeant Itai Avraham Ron, Staff Sergeant Benjamin Ballet, Staff Sergeant Ori Karmi, Sergeant Nachman Dekel, Captain Avraham Hananel Hindi, Staff Sergeant Daniel Bezgodov, Staff Sergeant Shlomo Reshetniko, Staff Sergeant Aner Elyakim Shapiro, Staff Sergeant Dor Lazim, Sergeant Shuham Shlome Nidam, Staff Sergeant Nadav Biton, Staff Sergeant Gali Roy Shakotai, Staff Sergeant Adir Eshto Bogail, Staff Sergeant Nehore Levi Amitai, Staff Sergeant Maru Alem, Staff Sergeant Neta Bar Am, Staff Sergeant Or Mizrahi, Major Shiloh Har Evan, Corporal Eden Baruch, Major Ido Hubara, Sergeant Matan Abagel, Master Sergeant Yishai Slotki, Captain Omer Wolf, Major Amir Naim, Staff Sergeant Ofek Arbib, Captain Ile Adani, Staff Sergeant Shachaf Nasani, Sergeant Boaz Menachem Yogev, Sergeant Mayor Noam Slatki, Staff Sergeant Shoham Bar, Staff Sergeant Yishai Fitusi, Sergeant Amir Ayal, Staff Sergeant Yarin Marie Peled, Sergeant Major Aviad Gad Cohen, Staff Sergeant Noah Price, Sergeant Habib Kian, Staff Sergeant Devere Haim Rossler, Sergeant Yael Lebouchor, Lieutenant Sachar Tal, Sergeant Matan Malka, Corporal Hadar Miriam Cohen, Staff Sergeant Daniel Kasvachuk, Sergeant Or Avital, Sergeant Major Ilan Fiorentino, Staff Sergeant Itai Ofek Lisko, Sergeant Benjamin Gabriel Yona, Corporal Lidor Makayas, Staff Sergeant Barak Ben David, Sergeant Nativ Kuzaro, Staff Sergeant Valentin Eli Ignacia.
Staff Sergeant Ben Rubenstein, Captain Itai Cohen, Sergeant Eli Bar Sadeh, Staff Sergeant Orel Moshe, Corporal Lior Levi, Major Ariel Ben Moshe, Captain Shiloh Cohen, Major Amir Skori, Sergeant Major Aharon Farash, Sergeant Danit Cohen, Chief Warrant Officer Ido Rosenthal, Sergeant Amit Guetta, Staff Sergeant Or Mizrahi, Staff Sergeant Ro'i Weiser, Lieutenant Adir Gaori, Staff Sergeant Guy Simhi, Sergeant Ariel Eliyahu, Major Tal Grushka, Captain Rom Shlomi, Sergeant Itamar Ayash, Sergeant First Class Vitali Skipakevich, Sergeant Major Omri Michaeli, Major Ido Yehoshua, Captain Tomer Shoham, Colonel Roy Joseph Levy, Sergeant First Class Ohad Cohen, Major Aryeh Shlomo Ziering, Sergeant Ori Locker, Corporal Ophir Davidian, Staff Sergeant Eli Gamzu, Captain Itai Maor, Major Avraham Hovelashvili, Staff Sergeant Itai Eliyahu Marciano, Lieutenant Colonel Yohonatan Tzor, Master Sergeant David Digmi, Sergeant Yaron Zohar, Major Adir Abudi, Captain Yotam Ben Basat, Staff Sergeant Ophir Tzioni, Lieutenant Adar Ben Simon, Staff Sergeant Or Esatu, Lieutenant Colonel Shachar Tzion Machlof, Staff Sergeant Afik Rosenthal, Lieutenant Yanai Kaminka, Captain Or Moses, Staff Sergeant Omri Neve Fierstein, Sergeant Dvir Lisha, Staff Sergeant Aiden Alon Levi, Staff Sergeant Yoval Ben Yaakov, Sergeant Guy Bazak, Corporal Neria Aaron Nagari, Corporal Naama Boni, Captain Yifta Yavetz, Staff Sergeant Ido Harush, Lieutenant Yoav Malayev, Sergeant Nathaniel Young, Major Chen Buchris, Major Or Yosef Ran.
Staff Sergeant Amit Most, Captain Amir Zur, Staff Sergeant Evyatar Ohayon, Major Mordechai Shamir, Sergeant Segev Schwartz, Sergeant Uriel Siegel, Sergeant Amir Lavi, Sergeant Major Lior Ben Yaakov, Sergeant Major Tal Maman, Staff Sergeant Adi Zur, Sergeant Reem Meir Batito, Sergeant First Class Joseph Malachi Gudwella, Master Sergeant Omri Belkin, Staff Sergeant Tomer Barak, Major Ido Israel Shani, Staff Sergeant Max Rabinoff, Major Raz Peretz, Sergeant Shir Shlomo, Sergeant Osher Chamaya, Staff Sergeant Yad Ben Yaakov, Staff Sergeant Benjamin Loeb, Sergeant Shir Biton, Captain Dekel Susia, Staff Sergeant Daniel Moshe Danino, Staff Sergeant Yakir Levi, Corporal Eli Azar, Sergeant First Class Amit Peled, Sergeant Sivan Simcha Asraf, Major Tal Cohen, Sergeant Ariel Erez, Staff Sergeant Itai Nachmias, Staff Sergeant Yogev Aharon, Staff Sergeant Halel Shmuel Sadon, Captain Hadar Kama, Staff Sergeant Yonatan Gola, Staff Sergeant David Ratner, Sergeant Ophir Testa, Staff Sergeant Amichai Yaakov Vanino, Staff Sergeant Tal Levy, Captain Alina Pravadusa, Major Rowie Chappell, Captain Eden Nimri, Sergeant Lior Azizov, Staff Sergeant Rotam Dushi, Staff Sergeant Or Malka, Major David Haim Meir, Sergeant Rowie Perry, Staff Sergeant Idan Raz, Lieutenant Naive Elazar Lax, Staff Sergeant Teshagar Taka, Lieutenant Yonatan Gutin, Sergeant Adir Tahar, Captain Nitai Amar, Sergeant Amit Sur, Sergeant Shira Shohat, Major Roi Negri, Major Peleg Salem, Staff Sergeant Yaron Ori Shea, Sergeant Adi Gromam, Lieutenant Ido Edri, Colonel Yehonatan Steinberg.
We have a number of people that are trying to get into the sanctuary, and I've been asked if everybody could move towards the center. I'm talking about these two sections. If you could move towards the middle, they can come down the side aisles and find seats. So if you have empty, thank you. If you have empty seats in your row, make room on the end. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La la. Sing with us. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Shomer Yisrael, protect Israel. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer, Shomer Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer, Shomer Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael.
I want to thank you all for being here this evening. I want to thank all of our San Francisco elected representatives that are here, the honorable consul generals that are here, and all of our San Francisco Jewish communal partners. You know, we come together today after a year that absolutely none of us could have imagined. And in Jewish tradition, when you reach that 1 year mark of mourning, it's the first time you're supposed to go back to the cemetery after the burial, where you reflect on what life was like before the loss. And then we see how we have personally begun the process of healing after being 1 year removed. This doesn't feel like that. This doesn't feel like a trauma that was. This feels like a trauma that is. Waiting and praying and just hoping that this will end. And a year later, it is not. And while our hearts break for all the innocent who have died in the past year, and while we pray with all our hearts and our souls that there is no more death and no more suffering, today is not about the past year. Today is about October 7th. Today is about Yizkor, about the memory of October 7th, 2023. Living through a year of trauma and loss, it's exhausting. In this space, it's a space for us to be with each other so we can cry, so we can mourn, so we can just be. Many of us lost people on October 7th, or we know people who lost someone on October 7th. But every single one of our lives here was changed forever on October 7th. It's my honor to invite up the Honorable Consul General of Israel.
Shalom, and thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. As I was writing my remarks for this solemn event, I couldn't avoid thinking about the symbolism of the name of the holy place where we're gathered tonight. This house of God is called Temple Emanu-El, which in Hebrew means God is with us. From here, therefore, I ask God to accompany us as we unite in remembrance of the innocent victims murdered and the fallen heroes of October 7th, a day we soon realized turned out to be the worst massacre of Jews since the Shoah. From here, I also ask God to bless us and keep us as we fight against the forces of evil that threaten our homeland and our people and communities in Israel, in the Bay Area, in California, and around the world. And as we keep upholding Israel's right to defend itself and to live in peace. We are here to remember them all. The 8-year-old girl who was left to bleed to death for hours all by herself after her hand was cut off. The women were raped and burned so badly they could not be identified. The brave soldiers, policemen, and policewomen, and members of other security forces who fought to their last bullet to protect civilians and paid with their lives. And we remember the 101 hostages still held in Gaza, many murdered defenseless in captivity, and those living still being tormented, starved, and tortured by Palestinians in homes, in hospitals, and in the terror tunnels of Hamas. From this place, we will continue to clamor for their immediate release. My friends, October 7th, 2023 was the worst day of our lives. On that woeful morning and in the days that followed, Jews were raped again, like they were during the pogroms of the Civil War in the Russian Empire, or the ghettos and the Nazi concentration camps. They were being burned alive again, like in the Valentine's Day massacre in Strasbourg in 1349. Tortured again, like in Aragon in 1377, in Damascus in 1392, in Apulia in 1511. And beheaded again, like in the massacre of the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza in Arabia in the year 627. The shock of the massive Palestinian terrorist genocidal invasion was compounded first by the images of jubilant hordes in the streets of Gaza, and immediately after, the jubilant hordes across the Pacific Northwest and in many other places across the globe. As more and more gruesome details of the barbaric assault continue to surface, the magnitude of the calamity and the anti-Semitic savagery of the perpetrators, who gleefully took pleasure in what they were doing, began to come to light. Later, we learned that Palestinian civilians took part in perpetrating the massacre, some of them UN employees. Some of them kept hostages in their homes. Civilians looted money and cars and equipment, Judaica artifacts, and even toys. Others, who used to work and were treated as welcome guests in the kibbutzim that were attacked, were collaborators, as they supplied detailed information that allowed for the murder and kidnapping of many. Rescued hostage Louis Har said that the kibbutzniks, and I quote, gave these Palestinians their hearts. They paid them back with destruction, dehumanization, and death. My friends, as if the trauma of the savagery and jubilation wasn't enough, large-scale denial appeared. Just like the Hamas atrocities bore a shocking resemblance to Nazi atrocities, so did the denial. Just like the Shoah denials that began in 1945 continue to this day, so the denial of October 7th started on October 8th and continues to this day, all in an effort to rewrite history. Silence was terrible then, but the moral confusion that we see now is perhaps worse. In too many countries, including here in the US, in the media, in the civil society and advocacy community, and worst of all, across a corrupt and co-opted UN system, from UNRWA to the International Court of Justice. In all of these places, in the public sphere and on social media, good is portrayed as evil, and evil is portrayed as good in a brutal attempt to demonize and delegitimize Israel. We see it in the preposterous accusations of genocide, including by laboriously and hatefully appropriating and weaponizing the memory of the Shoah, while in fact it is our enemies who perpetrate the makings of genocide against us. We see it when we're farcically blamed by the ICC prosecutor of deliberately starving Palestinians in Gaza or deliberately targeting civilians, while the truth is that no army has done what Israel is doing to minimize civilian casualties, sparing no effort in this noble pursuit, even as our enemies use civilians as human shields. We see it when progressives, self-defined exemplars of social justice, instead of speaking out for Jews, attack them in campuses across the US and march against the democracy of Israel in support of all that is diametrically opposed to what they claim are their values. This response to October 7th is nothing but another stage in a campaign that started way back in the UN in 1975, when Zionism was equated with racism. Soviet-inspired propaganda that has become a mainstream, normalized, and mutated form of the hatred of Jews. This moral confusion, paradoxically, now that Jews can defend themselves, serves also to wage war on our very ability to prosecute a just war, and a war of survival under extremely challenging geostrategic circumstances at that. Friends, Israel's fighting this multi-front war with less allies than we had expected. Some of our self-declared friends do not seem to be willing to lose other friends, or perhaps choose to bow to radicals of all stripes, in order to do what is right. They lack clarity and courage to speak the truth and to recognize there is no moral equivalence between nihilistic terrorism and a democracy fighting for its existence. In this battle between good and evil, standing with Israel is standing on the side of the values of the free, democratic, and liberal world. It is standing against a common enemy, the genocidal anti-Semitic jihadism that, through violence and terror, seeks to destroy our way of life. This is who we have been fighting before October 7th and since. My friends, we won't stand by while our people, no matter where they may be, are being harassed, discriminated, and marginalized. We surely won't stand by when our people are massacred. We will win this battle because we have no other choice. Each time we sing Hatikva, we renew our oath to be a free people in our land, the only place we can really call our own. And we should fight it alone if needed, and for as long as it takes. The bow of Jonathan will never turn back. Gone are the days when our blood could be spilled without consequence. Gone are the days when we were at the mercy of tyrants. Gone are the days when our freedom depended on the goodwill of other nations. We now have a state. We now have an army of incomparable courage, and we are defending ourselves. My friends, a year after October 7th, remembrance encompasses not only mourning and reflection on the hundreds of our sisters and brothers who were murdered and have fallen on that day. It must also include remembering everything that happened to the Jewish state and to Jewish people everywhere since. If we wish to honor the former, we can't afford to ignore the latter. In this moment in our history, I'm reminded of the words of the book of Psalms, chapter 29, verse 11. Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom. We ask God to grant us strength first, as we continue to fight this war for our existence. And only then, we hope that God will also bless us with the peace that we yearn for. Am Yisrael Chai.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואי לו אחסן, בנאות דשא ירביצני, על ממנוחות ינהלני, נפשי ישובם, נפשי ישובם, ינחני במעגלי צדק למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא ירערם, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך, שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפניי בצוררי דשנת ושמן ראשי דשנת ושמן ראשי דשנת ושמן ראשי כוסי רוויין אך טוב בחסד ילדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית אדוני ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Gam ki elech beged salmavet. There's been a part of each one of our souls for 365 days that has been walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And we continue to. And the Psalms teach us that we do it together. Psalm 23, a psalm of David. God is my shepherd, I lack nothing. God makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me to water in places of repose, renewing my life, guiding me in the right paths as befits the divine name. Though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, I feel no harm. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in God's house for many long years.
Good evening. I'm Rabbi Amanda Russell from Congregation Beth Shalom, and I'm among several of the rabbis and cantors here who have been asked to share one story of loss from October 7th. Just a few weeks ago, Congregation Beth Shalom hosted Ofri Reiner, 22-year-old survivor of the Nova Music Festival massacre. She told us how her morning started on October 7th, dancing all night at the festival only to hear bombs going off as the sun came up. She told us how she ran in a pack of festival goers for 11 miles without food or water, not knowing if and when she would come face to face with a terrorist along her way. When she finally arrived home, she was told that her stepbrother, Shalev Dagan, was missing. We were not related by blood, she said, but he was my brother. 3 days after October 7th, their family was informed that Shalev was killed. He would have turned 21 on November 15th, 2023. At 5:30 a.m. on October 7th, Shalev and 3 other Golani soldiers piled into an armored vehicle to do a routine patrol along the Gaza border fence. They were the first to encounter the invasion of Hamas terrorists into southern Israel that morning. They fought for more than an hour at 5 different locations, preventing 8 terrorists from entering Kibbutz Nir'im and succeeding in delaying the invasion by 2 hours. Their jeep was hit by an RPG fired by Hamas, and 3 of the 4 soldiers inside were killed. In learning about her brother's story, Ofri realized that as she was running, her brother was fighting only 6.5 miles away. She said, "The first time I saw the map, I understood that Shalev physically and mentally saved my life." Shalev is survived by his parents, his twin brother, and 2 stepsisters. Ofri said Shalev was one of the bravest soldiers she knew. Shalev's mother said Shalev had a smile which could conquer the world. He could wipe away all sadness with one little smile. He very much loved this country, and he was prepared to sacrifice everything for it. He was a hardworking, charismatic, and captivating boy. He was the type who would enter a room and fill it with light. His father said he was a very charismatic and talented kid from a very young age. He was successful in school, a gifted athlete, and had lots of friends. Every goal he set for himself, he achieved. On their birthday, his twin brother wrote on social media, "Mazel tov, my twin brother. Today we are 21. My beloved hero, I don't know how to celebrate without you. This day feels empty. I miss you, my brother, in our nonsense, in everything. Since the preemie ward, I never left you, and you never left me. 21 years full of you. I promise that I will walk with you forever. I love you endlessly and miss you like crazy every single minute." Shalev used to say with pride, "Ani mukhan lahakriv et chayim shali, kidei latet lecha chayim tovim yoter." I am willing to sacrifice my life to give you a better one. Ofri came to our community in part to tell us her story of October 7th, but also to show how she has overcome the darkest of times and grown into what she believes is a different, more positive version of herself. She acknowledged the pain of her brother's loss that is bigger than that which can be contained within her. And yet, she honors his memory by telling her story and his, how connected they were on that day, and to remind the world that sometimes facing fears and sharing grief are the things that give you life again. May we all continue to tell their stories. Zichrono livracha, may the memory of Shalev Dagan and all of the lives lost on and since October 7th be a vehicle for life and for blessing. Amen.
On the inside, the second page of your program, are the words to Livkot Lecha, to cry for you, written by Aviv Geffen. This song has become an anthem in Israel for the loss of Israeli life. And if you know this, sing along. Ani holech livkot lecha, tiyeh chazak lemala. געגועי כמו דלתות שנפתחות בלילה, לנצח אחי אזכור אותך תמיד, וניפגש בסוף, אתה יודע. ויש לי חברים, אבל גם הם קווים אל מול אורך המשגע. כשעצובים, לכן היה מלוח, וזה עצוב שלהחזיר ציוד אפשר, לא געגוע. לנצח אחי אזכור אותך תמיד, וניפגש בסוף. ויש לי חברים, אבל גם הם קווים אל מול אורך המשגע. וכמו הקהלים אנחנו מתנפצים אל המזח, אל החיים, להודות לך, תהיה חזק למעלה.
I'm Rabbi Jessica Graff from Congregation Shearith Israel. I chose to honor the memory tonight of Nira Ronen because she reminded me of so many people who I have met on kibbutzim over the years, people who are passionate about bringing the desert to life with fruit and vegetables and flowers, and also with community. Nira Ronen was 86 years old when she was murdered in her home in kibbutz Kfar Aza on October 7th. She hid in her safe room with her devoted caregiver, Angeline Aguirre. She is survived by her 4 children, Chen, Tzliel, Nitzan, and Niv, and 12 grandchildren, as well as at least 1 brother. She was predeceased by her husband, Akiva. After her army service, Nira settled in Kfar Aza and was among its early founders. It was there that she met Akiva Ronen. They were married on the kibbutz. In a video posted online in February and filmed not long before the massacre, Nira and other members of the kibbutz, including Bilha Epstein, who was also murdered on October 7th, discussed the early years of building Kfar Aza in the 1950s. She said, "I arrived in Kfar Aza and my impression when I got there was like I had arrived in a paradise that had nothing." Nira was delighted to be in her new paradise and to build a home. Kfar Aza became a wonderful community for Nira and then Akiva, their children and grandchildren, and so many friends. Our kibbutz had a certain kind of magic, she said. It wasn't beautiful in the time that we arrived. There wasn't much grass, much anything, but it had a joy of young people who came to do something that was really important to them, and it was in our hands. We did it. At her funeral, her grandson Omri recalled their final conversation. He said, "Savta, I spoke to you for the last time at 8 a.m. on that terrible Saturday. You said you were in the safe room with Angie and you were afraid." Omri said that when he finally returned to his grandparents' home in Kfar Aza, he found a note written in Arabic by one of her killers in her day planner that read, "You will die here. You won't stay here." "My grandfather and grandmother founded the kibbutz," Omri said, "and this place is theirs and ours." Zichrona livracha, may Nira's strength and enduring spirit be a blessing to all of us.
I'm Rabbi Bachir Torshio of the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco, right up the road. Among the most well-known biblical directives for the Jewish people is to zachor, to remember. Our tradition teaches and emphasizes that Jewish memory is not history. It's not a telling of what happened in the past. It does not treat the past as far away, as remote, as something that happened long ago in a different place to different people. Rather, Jewish memory is alive in our present. As I went through the too many names of people who lost their lives on October 7th, 2023, someone really rose up to me, Hava Ben Ami. I was so inspired by the fact that she walked from Syria with her family to Israel. to freedom. Chava ben Ami was murdered during the Hamas invasion of Kibbutz Be'ari on October 7th. She was 78 years old. Her daughter, Noam, told her mother to hide in a closet when her mother reached out to her, as Hamas terrorists were rampaging through her neighborhood. Around noon, Noam said Chava texted her, "They were just in the house. I'm so terrified." And I told her, "Don't worry, we'll be there soon to get you. I promise. We'll be there soon. We'll get you out." An hour or so later, they lost contact with her entirely. The family later discovered that the Hamas terrorists had kidnapped Chava and forced her to the home of Pessi Cohen, where dozens of gunmen were holed up with 14 other hostages. Only one of them walked out alive. But about her life. Chava was born in Aleppo, Syria in early 1948, amid violence and unrest in the period before the establishment of the State of Israel. And as I said, she fled on foot with her family toward Israel. The family settled first in Holon and then went to Kibbutz Be'ari, where Chava remained for close to 70 years. During that time, she worked many different jobs on the kibbutz, including one of her favorites, working in the chicken coop, and then as a teacher. She had a musical ear, singing at ceremonies and celebrations on the kibbutz, and she knew how to play the accordion, the piano, and she was a gifted flute player. In her later years, Chava took up a number of sports, including Pilates, swimming, bike riding, and yoga. Her grandson, Gal Yolande, introduced a musical interlude at her funeral, noting that with loss, we live not just with the memories that they leave behind, but we memorialize their spirit in every basic thing they did and taught us: language, the food they made for us, and of course, their music. In her eulogy, Chava's daughter, Noam, shared that her beloved mother was her best friend, her inspiration, her solid strength, and her complete support. The Israeli journalist Chen Artzi Sroor wrote that the memory of October 7th must be etched in our story as a people, as though each of us experienced it, like we relive walking out of Egypt, just like the story of the Exodus. But remembrance doesn't end with constructing our story. It leads to action, to hope and life and rebuilding. May we never forget, and in remembering those whose lives were taken, bring honor to their names and emulate their good deeds. May the memory of Chava ben Ami be for an enduring blessing, alongside all others who lost their lives on October 7th and in the years since then.